it's done. I just put in my 2 weeks notice and I got on a call and it was like emotional. I was like crying to my boss a little bit because it's like almost 4 years at this company that has felt like family, and I've learned a lot and stuff. So I got off the phone with them, and then I told our HR person who I just finished telling, and I'm so emotional. It's been a hard day, but it feels good to finally like have it out in the open and it's like actually happening, and I'm terrified and scared, but also so totally excited and humbled to be able to take this opportunity and really explore it and see how it goes. And I'm just like literally so excited but also so scared, and it feels good to finally just have a final decision and like it's actually happening.
Did you think that was going to be a sad video, but it was actually a happy tear video? I don't really tend to video myself when I am sad, but that was a very happy moment in my life, and I wanted to document it, especially if I was going into being kind of an online person, internet person. So here's that video of me totally upset, but also happy upset because it was such a pivotal moment of my life. That was such a game-changing day. Hello. Today I'm sharing with you my top 3 lessons that I learned that led me to leaving my 6-figure accounting job. Accounting like with numbers, not accounting like spicy accounting. I recently learned that was a thing, and I'm not a spicy accountant. However, it's not out of the question in the future. Just kidding. I'm also going to be sharing with you some questions to consider if you are in a similar situation or you're considering leaving your job, and if you've already left your job or you've been laid off because employers don't care about their employees anymore. Stay till the end because I'll also be sharing some things you might consider as you move into your next steps. The journey to quitting my 6-figure job needs a little bit of background. I didn't grow up with tons of money, and I felt the financial insecurity of my parents and family. So something that was a big important priority for me was being able to have a job that was stable, that I was going to be able to take care of my needs and take care of myself and not have to worry about money. And that's why I chose my profession in accounting, and I did my CPA. I did years of accounting, like beginning year in college for 4 years. I did accounting, and then I did some more work at some other firms in accounting, and then finally I made it to 6 figures, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to leave my job. Let me just back up a little bit too and say that I was never necessarily passionate about accounting or what I was doing in my field. Again, it was a largely financial stability, and it wasn't something I was terrible at, so I pursued it until I realized I was going through the motions, I was going through the day by day, and I just wasn't feeling like myself. I wasn't feeling motivated or passionate about what I was working on. I just wasn't happy. Of course, we were in a global pandemic, so obviously that had some factors into it. And I would say that losing 3 of my close relatives, I lost my aunt, my grandfather, and my mother, all within a few months of each other. And that was something really difficult to process. And I think trying to do that while navigating a job that I wasn't necessarily most happy at the time was very difficult. And they were very understanding, and I still love that company, the people. I enjoyed everyone I worked with, but the problem was I was so isolated. And with the pandemic on top of it, everything else was isolated. My social life just wasn't that great. So I think the thing that shook me the most was when I got news that a friend, a colleague of mine from college, had passed away in a car accident. She was around my age, and that really shook me. It made me think like, wow, am I really gonna go through a job that I don't feel happy about when I could literally die the next day? It was definitely impactful, I think, on how I felt about the work that I was doing and how I felt about my life. And I'll say, going back to why I said I chose my accounting degree was for financial stability, and I had that. I finally made it where I felt secure in my income. I still wasn't spending very much money. I had some money mindset things, which if you're interested, maybe I'll share another video about my money mindset stuff that changed when I left my job, because that was pretty transformational, what happened and how I use my money now versus how I used to use my money. And the idea of when you get money, it's like you always constantly want more of it, even if you have a lot of it and you don't need it. Number one lesson I learned out of that was that life is too short to go through life feeling unhappy or unsatisfied with what you're doing, and especially if you're spending majority of your life doing that thing. For example, work was a big part of my life. Especially when I started making more money, I felt this pressure that I had to continuously perform better and better, and I had this weight and responsibility of owing more of my life to this company because they were paying me so well, and I felt like I needed to do that. And that took a toll on the other aspects of my life, like my emotional, my physical, my mental health. All of these things were coming into combination, and I was just not feeling it. So my first lesson would definitely be is thinking about what you're doing and what you're spending majority of your life doing, and are you happy doing it? Is it something that brings you joy, or something that you can tolerate to get through to do the things that you love? Because I know everyone's situation is different. I'm not trying to tell you if you hate your job, quit, because there are jobs that we need, and sometimes you just have to push through the jobs that aren't necessarily as joyful to get to cover your other basic needs. The next lesson that I learned that led me to leaving my six-figure job, I had this feeling of lack of purpose, lack of connection with people. And again, we were in a global pandemic, so everything was digital. And even my job, originally, we were all very digital, so we didn't have a lot of in-person communication. But I think it felt a lot more isolating with the pandemic and having a limited social life. Of course, I did have my dog and my lovely partner to help me, but that's not, sometimes you just need a little more than that. I think what I was working towards, what I wanted to do, was more mindfulness and meditation teaching, because I had recently gone to my yoga teacher training because I wanted more work-life balance, and I saw how impactful yoga was. And then I started talking about it with other people, and I could see that what I was talking about was really building a connection with other people, and that people could benefit from what I was sharing, and I could directly see that. The work that I was doing before, again, I loved being able to work for such a wonderful company, but at the end of the day, it was literally about adding more thousands of dollars to a company or not. And sure, they were mid-sized companies, so they did appreciate and value our work. There's nothing wrong with doing that kind of work. But at that time, for me, it was hard for me to connect and see that I was making a difference, that I was having an impact on people's lives in the daily life. For example, what I did, if I saved someone $50,000, they might be happy, but that's about it. For me at that time, it just didn't feel like the connection was there. I felt like a grind. I went back to this feeling that I wasn't having a good enough purpose in my work. I wasn't feeling passionate about it, and that made it really hard for me to continue moving forward through my day-to-day. I definitely had some other traumatic things that I was working through at the time, which maybe that's for another video, but overall, big picture was that I didn't have enough impact the way that I wanted to other people's lives. And so that was the second reason why I wanted to leave my job. The next reason was something that I realized now, stepping away, that I could have done so much better at, was work-life balance. I know people talk about work-life balance all the time, and what that means and how we can do more of it. And I don't mean necessarily always shutting down at 5 p.m. because I worked in client service industry. You couldn't just shut down at 5 p.m. if you had a meeting at 6 p.m. because they're on the West Coast and we're on the East Coast, and it's only 3 o'clock their time and 6 o'clock our time on a Friday. Personal, real story. So there are 5 different elements of health that you should consider when you're working and living your life, right? So everyone knows about physical health. You might want to go to the gym, you might want to get a nutrition person to talk about the types of foods you should eat or should not eat and stuff like that. But then there's mental health, which we talk about so much on this page, and we talk about so much more now since the pandemic. But there's also the intellectual health. So learning to challenge yourself, continue learning, always being a forever learner. And I feel like that is one area that I was stunted in at my job, was I was continuing to learn, but not necessarily in the same format that I wanted, or it wasn't stuff that lit me up to learn about, like new lease accounting laws. Maybe that lights up some other people, but maybe that's not for me. So I think I was stunted in my intellectual health. My emotional health, I was really, really struggling at this time. Again, I was grieving, I had lost family members, I actually was struggling in my personal relationship, and I don't want to share too much for the respect of my partner, who we're now engaged, so everything's good. But, you know, I think I was really, really stressed out at my job and feeling anxious and uncomfortable so much that it often radiated out to my partner and to my friendships and personal life, and that made our relationship difficult. So I was navigating some emotional health issues, and then I also had social issues. Not social issues, that sounds weird, but I also, again, we were in a pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity to go out and do social fun things. And again, I did have my partner and my dog, but I think I felt so isolated, so lonely. I felt really alone and didn't feel like I was, again, making an impact and building that connection with people. I think it's so important that, like, one of our fundamental values, things that makes us human, is our desire for connection and community. We hadn't been working in the office, so I didn't have that community. We might have like a Zoom call every now and then for staff meetings and stuff like that, but it wasn't anything super social, and it was all digital, and the connections that you build through Zoom and through like group happy hours that are online are just not the same as the connection that you build face-to-face in person. Especially if you're an introvert, and especially if you have anxiety, because I think, and especially if you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, I think it's really hard to build that connection, especially if you don't like sports. That was one thing I really struggled about. And I remember we were doing one really fun like Zoom happy hour thing, and it was fun. And I do have a couple of my close friends that I talk to at work, but then we did a group thing, and it was so uncomfortable because as an introverted person, I don't want to take up the entire space of chatting with people to tell them, you know, my random story about something that doesn't necessarily add much value to the group, but would fulfill my social need that I had. And I think that was very isolating. The third reason why I left was I really, really sucked at work-life balance. I tried yoga, I got my yoga teacher training, I built that community up, and I realized that's where I felt the connection to people. That's what made me happy. That's what lit me up. And that's where I wanted to go and where I wanted to pursue. And at that point, things were just kind of magically lining up for me, in the sense that we didn't have necessarily a lined up apartment that we were going to move to next, because our rent was increasing a lot and we were definitely going to move, but we weren't sure where. So that was a little scary. We also had the ability to go and stay with my partner's parents down in a southern state, which is a lot less expensive than where we were currently living. And my partner was working remote at the time, and they said they were going to be remote for just a few months as well. So we thought, oh, maybe we just move down there for a little bit, take a break, and then I can see what this entrepreneurship life is like. So a lot of things were just lining up. And I'd like to segue now into, if you are in a similar situation, or you're looking or thinking about quitting your job, here are some questions you might want to consider before quitting your job, because it is scary to do. And I will say, my family, I remember getting a message saying, I didn't think you'd do it, that I would leave my job, because I am a very low risk tolerance kind of person. I like to build my savings up. I like putting money in retirement. You know, I like that security. But I was so done and so ready for change, and I had so much change that happened to me in that short few months of the pandemic that I really, really needed it. So now let's segue into, if you're in a similar situation, you want to leave your job but you're not sure if you should, here are some questions to consider before pulling the plug and quitting your job. So 1, identify what are the reasons that you want to quit. What's going on in your life? What's Is it about the work? Is it the work setting? Is it something else? If it's something maybe that you are lacking, maybe talk to your employer and see where you can get some support, or kind of poke around and see what your employer might be able to do to help you. For example, if you're struggling with mental health issues, maybe it's something that you could talk to your employer about. I recently learned my former company actually is offering some sort of support and therapy services for their employees. That's something that I never knew existed and never even spoke to my employer about on my own, but I always definitely recommend going to therapy if that's something you're struggling with. If you can't afford it, there are definitely lots of options, and happy to share some resources down below if you're curious. The next question that I would consider, is it feasible for you to leave your job? Do you have any type of savings? Do you have the ability to pay off your bills without making any money? Because I will tell you, unless you are going into either work that you've done in the past or doing something completely different, to definitely expect months, or if you're going to the content creator route, lots and lots of months without pay, and you need to be able to pay those bills and sustain yourself, right? Maybe it's you get a roommate, or maybe you move it back in with some family or something like that. What is your plan after you quit your job? So I think those are the big questions to consider. I would definitely consider writing a business plan if you go into the entrepreneurship route, because shiny object syndrome, hello, that's an issue. I struggled a lot with that, and I've definitely made some costly mistakes, but I'm grateful again that I've had money saved up and the ability to take these risks. But I definitely could have done it a lot smarter had I planned a little bit more ahead, instead of like, all these things are lining up, the universe is talking to me to quit my job, because literally that's how I felt. I had people reaching out to me about doing some work, like teaching them yoga and like other things like that. And I had a free business coach that was offering to help me for 6 months for completely free. And I'll say that didn't work out. Those people that reached out to me about teaching them yoga, they didn't really work out either. So I would want to advise you that having more concrete plans than the universe is telling me to do it is probably the better option. But hey, if you are reliant on the universe speaking to you and you know that it'll work for you, go for it. I'm not one to stop you. Next topic is, you have already left your job, or you maybe got laid off, because let's be real, employers do not care about you, especially as we have seen with the tech industry, that they are ready to dispose of you and replace you very easily with some other desperate soul who is ready to take your spot. So if you are in that situation, first I want you to evaluate your needs. Make sure you have shelter, make sure you have food, make sure you're taking care of the 5 elements of health that I spoke about, which are physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and even spiritual. And I don't mean spiritual like you need to go to church and be a Christian. I mean spiritual in that you feel like you have a greater sense of purpose, you have a connection to other beings and people and stuff like that. Spirituality is a word. Side note, spirituality is something that I feel like I struggled with and never even really considered, because I grew up in an atheist home, and anything woo-woo or spiritual was kind of looked down upon. I don't mean to, I guess, offend my parents by saying this, because they are allowed to have their beliefs. But I think that felt so ingrained in me that whenever I heard anything about chakras or the universe talking to you, I was like, yeah, not really. So anyways, check in with those 5 elements of health, which are physical, intellectual, social, spiritual, and emotional. Hopefully I said all those 5 right. So if you just got laid off, or you left your job already, this is the best time to start to take care of you. Evaluate your needs, evaluate those 5 elements of health that we talked about, and start to build out a plan. Or maybe you build out a budget is the first thing. A budget for how much money you can spend, how much money are you bringing in. If that's 0, that's okay. Don't worry, because there are tons and tons of ways to make money as an entrepreneur online, but it takes a little bit of time. It does take a little bit of effort, but there are ways that you can make money. So when you're searching for ways to make money after you just left your job, you definitely want to consider the skills that you already have. Is it something that you've done in the past? Is it something that you can teach? When I left my job, I was actually doing some part-time work for the company that I used to work for because we left on positive relations, and that's been actually fundamental in helping me build my business and helping me keep my sanity about not having any money coming in. So I would definitely say leave your job on good terms because you never know. And then 2, look at your skills, see what you might be able to offer. You'd be surprised. Literally so many different options interest people, like learning how to knit online. That's a big thing. Learning how to underwater basket weave. I'm just kidding. I don't know if that's really that big of a thing, but I'm sure there is a niche for it. There are billions and billions of people on the world that I'm sure one of them or a handful of them, how about enough of them, will want whatever it is that you are offering. So don't give up. Don't say that you don't have any skills because I'm 100% sure you have skills. If you don't want to do something that you already have skills in, learn something new. Maybe you take some time out, you go and do some certifications or some trainings and teach what you know. One mindset shift that you always need to have is there's always going to be someone out there that knows less than you. There's always also going to be someone out there who knows more than you. When we can collaborate and work together and realize that once we Cloud. Cloud. Come here. Come here, Cloud. Come here. Hey. You don't need to do that. You're okay. Sorry. If you don't know what else to do, or if you don't want to learn a new skill, or if you don't want to share skills that you already have, maybe you just get on social media and start building a following. It's literally that easy, and it takes time and it takes effort. The chances of you being an overnight success are slim unless you have experience in that thing or you're really good at it and you've practiced some. Just start where you are and build yourself up from there. So if entrepreneurship isn't for you and you were laid off from your job or you want to find some other type of work, this is also a really great opportunity to be mindful and intentional of the next place that you work. I still want you to consider the type of job that you would like to have. Consider when you are applying to jobs, what is the mission of the company? What are the values of the company? What do the leaders do? Because leadership at the top trickles down to the very low man on the totem pole. You know what I mean? If leadership is struggling, most likely the people at the bottom are going to be struggling. So you always really want to be intentional with how you're looking at a company. Interviews are a two-way street. So when you are being interviewed, they are making sure that you are a right fit for the company. So when you are interviewing for a job, you are also interviewing to make sure this company is a right fit for you. Do your values align? Does your mission align? Do you see opportunity for growth? Do you see a community that you'd like to connect with here? These are all really important questions to consider when you want to find a job that you love. And sometimes we don't have the luxury of finding a job that we love, and that's okay too. It's easier to look for work when you are employed. So if you have to take that fast food job or take that job that might not be so delightful but is working to pay the bills, go ahead and do it, and then work on the side to finding a job that better aligns with you. You also want to look at the company turnover, right? I used to work in Big Four public accounting, high turnover. You're just a number, you're just a cog in a machine. And for some, maybe that's fine. But for me, to feel that connection and community with a company, I really want to be able to have an opinion that matters, have my voice heard, and feel autonomy about working at a company. For me personally, I love the collaboration and autonomy to build and work on my own and build my career there. So these are all really important questions to consider when you are applying for a job. So y'all, we covered a lot today. So we covered, again, to recap, the 3 lessons that I learned that led me to leaving my 6-figure job, which one is I was not happy at my job. It did not light me up. Number 2, I gotta look at my notes because the sun came out and my brain's dead. Number 2 was, do you feel like you have connection and community at the place that you are working? And finally, are you fulfilling those 5 different aspects of health that we talked about previously? Physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and social. And are you able to balance that out with work in a way that feels good for you and sustaining, right? During busy season, when you work at public accounting, you work a lot of busy months, especially not during tax season because I worked in audit, but especially in the beginning of the year because a lot of companies had year in or 12/31 calendar year in. Definitely could always count your January to March, maybe even to May being super busy. And that's okay as long as you're allowing yourself to have breaks throughout these other periods, because sometimes you just gotta grind. Let's be real. Sometimes you have to grind, and that's okay. But it's not a sustainable thing that you can do forever. So learning, again, that work-life balance, how can you find that at your job in a way that works for you? The sun is coming out, so I think I'm gonna go in because I'm tired of squinting in the sun. Thanks so much for tuning into this video. If you found it helpful or if you have any other questions or comments, make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know, and maybe even topics that you'd like to learn more about. I'm super excited to be sharing this on YouTube. This video, I swear, I've been talking about filming this video since before the pandemic, since before I left my job. And here we are like 2 years later filming it because I had a lot of insecurities. I was afraid that, one, the video wouldn't be good enough, two, that I would go back to my corporate job and my whole experience would be a joke or it would have been a failure. And that's why it took me 2 years to film this. And, you know, it maybe was a bit of a failure in some ways, but that's a topic for another day. So if you want to know more about that or more about my story, definitely leave a question or comment down below. Make sure to hit that subscribe bell or subscribe button. And if you like yoga and meditation, those are things that I currently teach and offer on my platform, but I'm totally interested in sharing more content like this. Bye. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know, or share any questions or comments that you might have about the topic, or maybe stuff that you'd like to learn more about that I could share, because I want to continue offering content like this, but I want to make sure I'm providing value to my community. Oh my gosh, my dog's being super cute right now. He's tied up on a lead. Cloud, what are you doing? Bye.